move without remediating the environment that they have destroyed over the years, then it is not a just transition.
Thank you very much. Please permit me to summarize as environmental justice as your framing for a just and inclusive. Is that correct? And reparative as well. Okay, so making sure that the environment is remediated and repaired to avoid a situation where people are left with bad socioeconomic outcomes. Can we take one more?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about the inclusiveness. When you talk about inclusiveness, it means that everybody must be carried along. Nobody should be left behind. For instance, we have a situation where Ulibu, at first, where oil was first found, they didn't have electricity. So that was injustice. It was just recently that they had electricity. So in transition, everybody should be carried along.
Thank you so much. I think this was very much unplanned, but we have received very strong three themes that we can build on for this discussion. The first is equity, and the second is on environmental justice, and then the third is on being carried along, which is another way to express the term inclusiveness. So I think that framing is really helpful because it sounds like we have a common understanding on what a just and inclusive transition means for Nigeria. So the next point of discussion is the implications of Nigeria's transition on affected groups. So groups meaning those that are at risk of facing negative impacts of the transition. With every transition, there'll be winners, there'll be losers. How do we minimize the number of losers and maximize the opportunities that comes from the inside? And some of these groups include host communities, as rightly mentioned. Some of them include oil and gas workers. Some of them even include government stakeholders that rely heavily on revenues from the oil and gas sector. And then there are other vulnerable groups like youth, marginalized populations, women. Oh, no one can hear me. Okay. Is it better now? Okay. Okay. So let me just quickly backtrack. How do we minimize the number of losers with transition? And I was just giving a few examples, including oil and gas workers, host communities, marginalized groups, women, youth, and a number of government stakeholders that have built heavy reliance on revenues from oil and gas. And I'm now putting the floor open to get feedback on ways that the energy transition plan can minimize the risks associated with these groups that are on the so-called losing side. So is there anyone that would like to contribute to?
Sorry, I'm sorry, I'm not talking too many. Basically, I represent the workers. So concerning energy transition in the oil and gas industry, what it means that basically food up production, refining of petroleum products, having byproducts of kerosene, diesel, PMX, they are going to be phased out. And the workers in this category of workers in this set of work will need to also move up. Either they lose their job or they are reskilled. If they cannot move to that level, they are reskilled to move to new energy source. And if we say we are moving to gas, we also realize that our current equipment infrastructure for production of diesel, kerosene, we need to also be a little bit altered. So the technical skill needed in this aspect. And you recall that also in 1978, thereabout, there was this indigenization decree that was made, and this encouraged private investors to come into the downstream sector of Nigeria oil and gas industry. That's why you have private investors building petrol stations, buying petrol trucks. This asset will also be stranded when we move to gas. The pump and the station you are using to dispense kerosene, PMS, and diesel will no longer be in use. The workers of these petrol stations also needed to be trained or to be reskilled. They were likely to lose their job. Then coming down, we also realized that who are the end consumer of this product? The households, women. They will need also. And their assets, though very small, like cooking stove, Tiger generator, they are very, very valuable to these individuals at the lower cadres of the society. If they are not adequately carried out, who compensates them for this important asset they are going to throw away? So we also need to take care of them. Then when we are talking about energy transition, it's not only about oil and gas workers. It also involves transport workers. It also involves you and I. Our cars are currently running on petroleum. It will also transit to gas. The changing kits, who handles that? And we're also talking about Nigeria is currently having problems where most of us rely on generators, diesel power generators. All of us are going to abandon this generator because we are going to move, Nigeria has signed on to the fact that 83% of black carbon emissions will stop in the next 8 years. So what happened to the generator? Your generator that you're just buying today, in the next 8 years, you will need it again. And if we are moving to renewable energy, buying of solar panels and things like that, who provide funds for this? Where do ordinary people in the rural area get this? We're also talking about agriculture, production of food. Who take care of the basic rudiments that they're using in the farm? These are key components of society that our plans are not talking about. Our plans have been focusing only on the big capitals, the IOCs, the investors who are only there to profiteer, to make more money. And at the end of the day, who will be at the receiving end? The ordinary citizen that is not even being carried along now in the plans. So to make it equitable, just, and let's not forget the community. The place where we've extracted crude oil has been over the years devastated. And we are going to abandon everything there and move out. What happened to them? They cannot fish again. They cannot farm again. And that was why I took exception to the man that was talking about lithium and about coal. We are still going to keep extracting rather than protecting. And finally, I want to say that even our gas is exhaustible. It's not sustainable in the long run. We are not caring for the future. We are only talking about ourselves now. When we leave, what happens? When the gas gets exhausted, what happened to us? We are left to start looking for alternative source again. And that's why everybody's asking us, we have abundance of solar. Gas may be a short-term adjustment, but in the long-term plan, we should start planning ahead, beyond now. And in the formation of policy, it should not be just people that are heading for our status. Many of them do not even understand what it's all about. They are just to use big words and go and sign and come back to the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was really great. So I think we're picking up
reduction in methane, right? And we know that gas has 80 times more methane content, right, than other sources. So when you look at this, you just see clear contradictions in the documents that you cannot assume that you will achieve what you want to achieve with the strategies you are putting down on paper. So the thinking that many people coming from my background have is that, yes, the transition is going to be slow, it's going to be incremental, but the focus should not be that we are going to continue with the current systems. It is going to be unfair to future generations. For instance, currently we are underutilizing the value of the fossil fuels that we extract. So many of the subcomponents of the fossil fuels are not even being maximized, right? And we are just taking it all out and using it for what we can use right now. How about the future generations who also co-own current resources? Suppose 20 years, 40 years down the line, we begin to see more sustainable ways. There is research and development that throws up more sustainable ways of utilizing this. Other, other uses for these fuels beyond the energy uses it's currently being put into. You see that clearly those future generations have already been shortchanged by the present generation. So it is important that the focus of the energy transition plan should take the concerns of future generations into are disengaging, selling off their assets, and moving out. We should also find a way of tying them down to investing in the new energies. So that's we're looking at fairness, we're looking at issues of justice in this respect. So that, as it were, we are not left fully with the short end of the stick, having to bear the cost of the degradation in the communities, our population suffering the brunt of previous extraction activities, and then suddenly we have this new development, and then we are not part of it. If we are moving into renewable energy, solar energy, and the rest of it, wind energy, then of course we should also commit the new energies, moving away from oil and gas, involving also in the solar energy and wind energy and the rest of it. That is the way I look at it. That's how I see my own justice being played out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Earlier, I was having a conversation with somebody and said, we're already discussing energy transition in the country, and we don't have plans in place
there must be restructuring of
yet. So these are the issues that we'll continue to have a conversation about. I'll hand over the microphone back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ma, and thank you all for participating, and we welcome you all back to the main session.
I think we are expecting one or two of the session members to rejoin so that we can have once again, very distinguished resource persons, esteemed gentlemen and ladies, would like to welcome you to the closing plenary of the National Dialogue on Energy Transition. There were 4 sessions, session 1, session 2, 3, and 4. So what we will do, we will take the conclusions of the deliberations in the various sessions, and this will be done by the sub-rapporteur for each of the sessions, and then comments and questions on each of the reports before we then get the key highlights of the communique. That will be the draft communique, and then closing remarks by the conveners. I imagine that we have nominated sub-rapporteurs for each of the sessions. 2 minutes max, and then you have the opportunity of comments and responses. Fine. If it is the moderator who has been tapped to report back to the plenary, that's just as well. So if we are ready, as I said, for us to save time, dispense with the preliminaries, unless the preliminaries are useful in amplifying the conclusions of your subgroup. May I now respectfully invite session 1, which was coordinated by Zira Kwage and Faith Nwandishi on securing a just and inclusive energy transition for Nigeria, to submit their report. I'm not serious. I'm dead serious. That's to say, submit your conclusions. That's your report. I mean, they say, and I said, just give us the highlights. So dispense, you were writing when I was speaking. Let me repeat it. You want them to, is it more convenient? Let me just find out. Is it more convenient to ask the moderators of each of the sessions to be on the platform and present their report? Is it, you find it more convenient that way? Faster? I would have thought fantastic. So, most respectfully, Zira Kwage and Faith Nwandishi, please take your positions. Mr. Brown Ogbefun, take your seat. Mr. Austin Olorunshola, kindly take your seat, sir. And Enebi Okpalowa, kindly also take your seat. So we get the report. The report is by way of highlighting your conclusions for each of the groups. We're in a situation, say in session 1, where you have 2 coordinators. The presumption is that you would have harmonized your position, and then one of you will deliver it. And from there, you take comments and questions. So we'll go one after the other, not more than 2-3 minutes for your presentation, and then comments and questions. We want to spend no more than 5 minutes on each of the sessions. Let's begin with session 1.
Thank you very much. And thanks to the members of the session. We started our conversation by having a common understanding of what energy transition is. And we all agree that energy transition has to do with equity and inclusion, ensuring that everyone is carried along. And the aspect of ensuring that jobs are protected, because while you're looking at the energy transition, you're also looking at the transition to infrastructure, the kind of infrastructure that's will be in place, the kind of skills that will be in place, and the impact on livelihoods. So we went on to look at the Nigerian context and its impact on the different groups. We agree that the energy transition will have impact on women, young people, on jobs, and of course, on the governance structure. So beyond just looking at the different impacts, we actually dealt more on important resolutions and suggestions for remediation. One that resonated very well with the group was the area of research and development. That there should be proper research and development on documenting the impact and learning from past lessons, learning from the era of fossil fuel, taking that on into the energy transition renewables that we're looking at, so that we don't go back the circle each time, but ensuring that things are done properly. And somebody mentioned the part about just infrastructure, that while we're having a conversation around just energy transition and inclusion, we should also have a conversation around just infrastructure. There should be proper infrastructure, and also having a consideration on the impact of the infrastructure we have had in the past. If we're saying we want gas, what's the infrastructure that is available, and how do you ensure that you have the right skill and technology in the utilization of that? Then technology also plays a very great role in that. Then finally, we agreed that funding is a major aspect of this. If people are polluting and we are bearing the brunt of the pollution, while we are not contributing a lot to this pollution, people should be held responsible for their acts so that they make funding available. For instance, if we are talking about just infrastructure, inclusion and equity, just transition, it has to be funded. And most times countries, African countries, are not able to generate the funds domestically to be able to address all of this. So it's important that we engage and put on the table that the impact on communities, women, young people, and on jobs should be well taken care of, and adequate funding for this transition to happen in such a way that everybody is carried along. So this is, in a nutshell, is a summary of our conversation. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so very much.
I hope I have represented us well.
Yes, is even very good, because we are going to do something differently, because we are having our cardboards here to show that the group, it is what you have written that I'm going to read to the public. So is he agreed? Good. Now, the introduction that we have here, our topic is role of gas in Nigeria's energy transition, unpacking risks, opportunities, and the path forward. First, we do know that gas has a very huge role in all the sectors, especially when we talk about heating, cooking, and other industrial applications. And that's because it's also very more resilient and durable than so many of the sources that we have. Now, it will also help us to address issues of poverty, in which case it can, because when you talk about local gas consumption for the people as of today, I don't think the access is much. So if we are able, therefore, to leverage on LNG, for the people, I know that Comrade Afolabi has said today, even if you are going to give people gas, do they really have the money to buy them? I think we need, it's just a matter of the chicken or the egg, but at least let's do our part, let's make it available. I also believe that when the thing is more available for the people, the price may likely come down. Secondly, the issue of Ukraine and Russia is not going to be for life. I'm also sure that by the time this phase goes, we're going to have something that is cheaper for the people and so on and so forth. And we also believe that it can become a zero emitter of carbon if combined with carbon capture and storage. We don't have all the time to dwell on all the niceties as relates to expansion of details. However, we also have challenges. First, we have absence of critical and matured midstream infrastructure to support gas-based projects, at least in the country for now. Above all, we have policy somersaults in our country. You put in policies, by the next few months or few years down the lane, you are coming back again. You are not just fine-tuning, but you are also destroying maybe what you've started before. When we're talking about poor incentives, we're reminded in our group that PIA has good incentives for gas. But the question is, yes, we have, but as of today, I don't think the incentives has brought anything. So we still mention it so that it doesn't seem as if we didn't know what is in the PIB, but at least to let you know that as of today, the incentives for gas will not attract more investors onto the sector. The high cost of funds is one. Then we also realize that we could have skill gaps. Then vandalism of distribution and water transmission lines and so on and so forth, and cool impact of production and so on and so forth. I think from there we went on to risk. Oh, this is doing it differently. Very comprehensive. And the risks, we said management of change. We don't know how people will look at this, because with time, the change from what we are used to may likely impact on jobs, may impact on people, may also have some resistance. Inadequate skilled manpower, dumping of CNG vehicles and other equipment due to absence of codes and standards. We looked at that because with time, we are likely to have heavy dumping of most of these vehicles on us. Do they have good codes and do they have the standards? Are we ready and are we prepared to do what is needful to ensure that we are not going to be having accidents and they become safety issues? But however, irrespective of the challenges and the risks, we have opportunities. First, Nigeria has the highest natural gas reserve in Africa, and that is consoling. Then the acceptability of people shelving nuclear facilities tend to be creating more opportunities for use in gas environment. And then those are the opportunities that we're going to be looking at. And then, of course, we know that the process of gas production and processes can also help us with production of hydrogen, creates opportunity for gas, production, and so on and so forth. Global activities like the Russia and Ukraine crisis is opening opportunities for us. But I would have thought that if we had done the needful before now, we would have been able to leverage on what is happening in Russia and Ukraine. So which means we are coming a little bit late in the day. But whichever way it is, let us believe that we need to do what we need to do as a country to get our system ready for the future. There could be future pandemics, we don't pray for it. There could be future anything, we don't pray for it. It will be too bad for this country if there is another opportunity and we are going to trod the same road twice. God forbid. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much. Session 2, session 3, Mr. Austin Olorushola.
Oh, it stands ahead as the in as much as what she just said that we were supposed to have mentioned the Morocco, the trans whatever pipeline, but the truth is, we are not that we are not optimistic about it. For instance, we talked about funding, for instance, all right? Have we been able to get the adequate fund? These are things, we know that there are funding agencies, there are people that are interested in them, but the truth is, as at today, I just hope it doesn't end the way of others. Huh? No, let us, yes. So let us, because we do not really take most of these things very, very seriously. And it's impacting on the way we do business, it's impacting on the way people see us from the outside. Let me give you an example. I was discussing with Mr. Austin this morning, and we were just discussing on the sideline that we need to change the optics. What do we mean? You are going to ask somebody to loan you money for a project. You take a jet into that environment. The person that is going to loan you money or going to lend you or even help you is coming with a BA. So, or metro train. The person goes back home and says, are these people really serious? So these are some of the reasons we didn't even include most of those things. I may be wrong, the group, but this is exactly what we think it should be. We need to change a lot of things before we can begin to key into the projects that they have now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Our group looked at the biggest problem, which is funding. If we had a bit more time, we actually brought the money in here, but yeah, but they were hurrying us up. So we have just a few recommendations in terms of initiatives that we really need to look at a little bit more in greater depth. And when you talk about funding, then also we need to talk about the enablers, what will make that happen. So I'll just go through the funding initiatives. And just to take it from where Brown left it, we believe that we have to use what we have to get what we need. We must start from there. Charity begins at home. So whatever we have that we're making money today, we need to do something about it, and pretty fast. And what is it? It is still this, your oil and gas. Yes, it is going to be, the demand looks like it's going to go down in the next, say, 30, 40, 50 years. But between now and another 20 years, who stops you from actually maximizing the kind of value that you can capture from it? Nobody. So it should be part of your transition plan, okay? That is, and in fact, the way we put it is that you need more oil to get out of oil, because that's where your money comes from. And a chunk of that certainly will help in the funding of all these initiatives you are talking. Of course, the second bit of it is what we have been used to doing, going cap in hand to beg money here and there. But really, frankly speaking, it shouldn't be debts any longer, because I think we're already overburdened. So that could also be an opportunity. We have to find a way to block leakages and cut down on waste. So we have some good money in this country, but it's all going down the drain. So if we can find a way to look at ourselves in the face and say, this we will not do again, that we will not do again, instead of we will do this, we will do that. No, ask yourself, what can we stop? What should we stop? Okay. That certainly is a good source of money for you. The top 10 polluters in the world, you know how much they pollute? 80% of the emissions. We, and this time I'm even looking at it from an African perspective, we need to put more pressure on them. More pressure on them to push more money to mop up all these emissions we are talking of, because in the first instance, they were the ones that did all that. We must push our gas business to the limit, to such an extent where you can even go for things like a swap or a kind of barter arrangement. So we need funding for this gas pipeline we are talking of, the one that goes through to Morocco and everything and all that. Where is that gas going to? It's going to somewhere in Europe, for example. So they can fund it. They can fund it, knowing fully well that you have to sign that all that it's going to come to you. They can fund it up front. So that's another way you can get, they call it resource-backed infrastructure development. You can do that. And there's already a lot of carbon credit, carbon tax mechanisms that are already on the table. We should really investigate that. And the last is what he was campaigning for about 3 weeks ago, this debt for climate swap, okay? That is still being worked in detail, but it's also an opportunity to fund some of these climate actions. Now, but let me then quickly go through the enablers. You will not get things like this if your business environment is not safe. So we have to find a way to invest in security, because it is a bigger thing, actually, the number one thing for investor confidence, because you have to be sure that where I'm taking this money to, it's not just going to be frittered away. So we have a lot of work to do on that. And that will impact maybe a bit of policy and regulatory reforms across so many of our MDAs, okay? So that we can actually really give, we did it before in this country, that investors would prefer to come here first before to go to any other place, you know. And I think it is still possible to get it back. We must be clear with a plan. As we discussed this morning, the ETP is not a granular plan yet. And somebody was, I think you talked about the fact that South Africa were able to attract some pledges, about $8-something billion at COP26. That was because they went with a plan. There was a plan that was credible. So you could point to say, okay, I can do number 1 or number 5. We don't have that yet. Unfortunately, COP27 is coming up next month in Egypt. We won't be ready for that either. So, okay, no problem. Better late than never. Please, let's make sure we help government to develop this credible plan to the extent that when we are going for COP28, it is really, really ready. And then you'll be able to actually attract funding for people, because they need to see the credibility of it and the transparency of it. Another enabler, it's of course, we need to also begin to work on the renewables part. And we heard this morning from the solid minerals guy around lithium development for battery technologies and all that. We need to also begin to do that. Then someone talked about the fact that maybe at the end of the day, we may actually need to set up an energy transition fund, but not like all these other funds you know of. Because this one must be backed by serious governance. So that doesn't completely fritter away, because at the same point in time, you want to have a kind of a central coordination for all these climate action funds. And the last is collaboration. There's nobody in the world that is going to win this match, this energy transition palaver, if we all don't cooperate. Because it's not like COVID, where you can say, stop planes from entering your country. If I'm polluting here and you're not polluting there, it's only a matter of 3 or 4 days, it will come. Just 30 seconds, I'll be through. So we must cooperate. And one of the things we talked about there, since Africa is actually, we have majority of these climate issues, both the risk and we're even taking the brunt of all. Maybe we need to begin to look at an intra-African COP. Let's discuss our issues first before we go for the global COP. And try as much as possible to collaborate first before we go to any other. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
We know that
Mr.
is section
Mr.
4. Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Olorunshola. Thank you very much. We go to
Section
the
4.
moderator for section 4.
Yes, sir.
Enebi Okpalowa.
Yes, sir. Please,
four.
just before then, we realized that we did not read our recommendations.
Okay,
And-
so what we will do, sir? What
No.
we will do, sir? Kindly submit your recommendations.
Oh, that's fine.
To the secretariat.
Oh, that's very fine.
All right, secretariat. So,
Okay.
moderator for
that's very
section
fine.
4, Enebi Okpalowa, please.
Thank you very much.
And conclusions.
Yes, it appears I represent the youth quota on this panel. I consider it an honor and a privilege anyway.
Some of us are reconfigured.
All right, let me quickly start with a story one of our participants told us. He said he tried to change his energy source from generators and main the grid to renewable energy, solar. And he was given a bill of 4 million, quite expensive. This story tells us the challenges of energy transition, even at an individual level. Eventually, he got another consultant who gave him a much more lower bill of 2 million, and he proceeded with that. After getting the panels, the materials, the equipment, he was then told that his load was too much. And so he had to get renewable energy compliant appliances. So that means he has to change his electronics, additional costs. Why I started with this story is because it's reminiscent of what we are looking at in the world today. You change from carbon fuels, hydrocarbon fuels, and then you have to change your end products. The reason we have the importance of electric vehicles today. My group had the topic of diversifying Nigeria's economy.
It's 15 hours.
Diversifying Nigeria's economy for sustainable development. Now, if you are a Nigerian or you live in this country, I'm sure if you listen to news in the last decade, diversification is not a new concept to you. We've heard it over and over in rhetoric from government, politicians, even civil society. So we tend to understand the idea of what diversification means. But why is this important? Nigeria generates 90% of its revenue from crude oil. Over 60% of government revenue total, it's from oil. So when you say you are transitioning, you are leaving that source of sustenance as a country. What do you move to? That is why diversification is important, not just at the federal level, but at sub-national levels, the state governments and the local governments. And that is what my group was looking into. we came up with some very, very, well, let's say the low-hanging fruits. It depends on how you look at it. The first thing that popped up was agriculture. Agriculture employs a majority of Nigerians today, and that sector cannot be overemphasized. But not just agriculture as we know it. The recommendations were agribusiness and technology. We need to develop our storage technology. We need to make sure we reduce post-harvest losses to ensure that we get more value from agricultural produce. That is one of the recommendations from my group, agriculture. And then, secondly, mineral resources. Our panelist earlier today from the Mine and Cadastral Office mentioned the fact that we had lithium, but that is not the only minerals we have. There's something called the transition metals or transition minerals. These are metals that are in high demand from now till 2040. They include nickel, cobalt, aluminum, copper, lithium. The demand for batteries will increase like 2 or 3 folds between now and 2040 because of the higher demand for electric vehicles. So we are going to have increased demand for these minerals. Thankfully, we had a participant who was able to provide information that we have most of these minerals in Nigeria. So we need to start thinking as a country on how we can begin to harness these resources to generate revenue. It might be another way Nigeria can generate some good sustenance, and not just exporting the minerals, but participating across the entire value chain, from exporting minerals to developing the intermediate products and the end products from these resources. Thirdly, we looked at standardizing our products. We have renewable energy products in Nigeria today that do not meet some standards. We invest in renewable energy technology, and then after 1 year, you probably have to change your battery or have to change a panel. That should not be the case. We need to standardize. We need to ensure that there are standards and codes so that when somebody pays money, it doesn't go down the drain. And then we need policy direction, especially for the mineral sector, to ensure that we can coordinate private sector investment as well as government action. Then we looked at subnational government, safe sustainability. State governments can no longer rely on allocation. In an economy that does not depend on crude oil, a post-oil economy, what will states that cannot pay their salaries without tax allocation do? So there needs to be a way that state governments can sustain their local economies. And that calls for the other argument of what we tend to describe as restructuring. But we put it as economic restructuring, fiscal restructuring, economic democracy. We need to ensure that states have the ability to generate enough revenue, at least to cater for at least their workforce. We cannot be paying civil servants of states by fact allocation. That is no longer sustainable. Only 3 states, according to Budget's State of States report last year, can sustain themselves without fact allocation, can pay salaries. And that is not sustainable. We need to ensure that state governments are able to handle their bills without fact allocation, because the truth is this: in the next 10 to 15 years, if not sooner, that money will no longer be available. And then we looked at other sectors that can be harnessed. Tourism, we have that potential across the country in various regions. They can harness that tourism potential. Entertainment, someone once said that one of the most efficient, okay, I'll run up in a minute. One of the most efficient part of the economy are parts that the government did not touch, and he cited entertainment, information technology. Basically, we need to do that. Democratize the regulations to ensure that these parts of the economy, these sectors flourish. Recycling was also mentioned. If we have a lot of vehicles that are no longer used, that is ICE vehicles, internal combustion vehicles, what happens to them? What happens to their parts? They can be recycled to generate revenue for the country. And then one very crucial part, or 2 more points: develop indigenous technology. We have to ensure that things like pottery, sculpting, things like that can be developed. Technology that is indigenous to Nigeria can be developed to a level where they are internationally marketable. And lastly, one recommendation was good governance. We cannot achieve all of this without good governance. One participant mentioned that we have a lot of policies in the country. One of the issues is implementation. We cannot follow through without proper and good governance. I'm sorry, just one more last point. I think it's similar to what Dr. Austin Lawrence said. Security. If you are going to tell people to go to the farms to produce more food, you need to ensure that there's security in these regions where the food is produced and where the minerals are mined. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We just listened to the reports and conclusions of the breakout sessions 1, 2, 3, and 4. We were going to take a comment or two from the floor, but the presumption is that we all participated in one or the other of the sessions. So anybody has any comment? Very brief one, an amplification, subtraction. So I take it that there's concurrence with the conclusions presented by the sub-rapporteurs who were also the moderators of the various sessions. Please, let's give them a round of applause. So thank you very much. Faith Nwandishi, sat in for session 1, Mr. Brown Ogbeifun, session 2, Mr. Austin Olorunshola, session 3, and Enebi Okwaluwa, session 4. Thank you very much once again for your contribution. What's going on? Very distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we would now take the draft communique from the head of the drafting team, and that's Adejoke Akimbode, who is also the head of extractives at Budget Foundation. Adejoke, please kindly step forward to present the draft communique. Ordinarily, Adejoke, before you step forward, please come. Let me not assume a function that ordinarily is not mine. I'm a moderator. For this plenary, we ought to have a chairman. That's the closing the plenary. We ordinarily should have a chair who will preside over the closing session, so that when the draft communique is read, the chair of the plenary would then be the one to direct proceedings. Do you agree with what has been read? Do you disagree? If there is concurrence, everybody will say aye, then I will come back and then do the final closing ceremony. So, with your kind permission, I would ask that we get a chair to preside over the closing plenary, namely approving or considering rather the draft communique. Do I have any hand up, or do I tap anyone to do that for us? Benga Noiga, please preside over the closing plenary, in particular, consideration of the draft communique. There you are.
Thank you. Thanks for dragging me in here. I least expected it. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor and privilege of presiding over this session. Let me go straight to the point. I guess you are ready for the presentation. Please allow her present the draft communique. I guess it's just you've incorporated some of the, okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you everyone for being an integral part of this conversation. We really appreciate your presence until the end, at least waiting to the end of the program. The National Dialogue on Energy Transition, the objective of this dialogue was basically designed to provide a multi-stakeholders platform for state and non-state actors to discuss, debate, engage, and make meaningful contributions to the ongoing discourse on energy transition in Nigeria. It is actually expected to galvanize needed national consensus on Nigeria's pathways to the transition and increase public awareness of the challenges, risks, and opportunities that are associated with the energy transition, including its implications on the economy and livelihoods. So we had a presentation and a panel discussion, and the dialogue featured a presentation on energy transition, global perspectives for national consideration. We also had a breakout session on 4 key topics: securing a just and inclusive energy transition for Nigeria, the role of gas in Nigeria's energy transition, funding and financing the transition to scale up clean and reliable energy, and diversifying Nigeria's economy for sustainable development. So during these breakout sessions, we actually identified some key challenges and also some resolutions were made. So I will go first with the challenges, then the resolutions. Following the deliberations and frank discussions among participants during the dialogue, the following challenges were identified. 1, the energy transition plan lacks the input of stakeholders and citizens. The development process of the Nigerian energy transition was not consultative enough. There is an absence of stakeholders and citizens' input. 2, the energy transition plan is still at a high level development process that lacks the consultation and inclusion of citizens and relevant stakeholders. 3, the funding source of $1.3 trillion as identified by the transition plan is problematic and could constitute an obstacle to its implementation. Number 4, the Nigerian energy transition plan has not been aligned with the National Development Plan and the Medium-Term Expenditure Framework, MTEF. 5, the lack of adequate infrastructure and connectivity between Eastern and Western Nigeria poses a great threat/barrier to the successful implementation of this transition plan. 6, major oil companies are divesting and leaving environmental degradation in their wake. 7, due to the introduction of policy reforms by different administrations, Nigeria lacks a steady implementation process. And number 8, insecurities such as the sabotage and vandalization of transmission lines result in a shortfall of resources. And here are some resolutions to these challenges. At the end of the national dialogue, the participants, which is made up of state and non-state actors, rose with the following resolution. Number 1, the energy transition plan should be translated into an implementable action plan that will be consultative and inclusive. There is a need to operationalize the PIA, the Petroleum Industry Act, as it adds adequate provisions on the use of gas as a transition fuel and decarbonization. The federal government should be explicit on the delivery mechanism of the energy transition plan and how the green economy will translate to job creations for Nigerians. The Nigerian energy transition plan should be aligned with the National Development Plan and the Medium-Term Expenditure Framework. Number 5, transparency, accountability, and stakeholder engagement should be mainstreamed into the Nigerian energy transition plan/agenda. 6, Nigeria's energy transition should be viewed from the lens of an opportunity and less of a risk factor to its economy. 7, greater attention should be paid to the solid mineral sector as it holds potential for the Nigerian energy transition plan because of the availability of strategic energy minerals such as lithium, cobalt, and several other minerals in the country. 8, in the same vein, the legacy conflict issues around solid minerals, particularly in the Northeast, should also be resolved to ensure that the ramp up of the energy transition does not create further social upheaval. The energy transition journey must be approached in a way that will be devoid of errors of the fossil fuel era. Host communities and environmental concerns must be taken seriously and factored into the transition plan and its implementation. A just transition should ensure the remediation of the degraded environment by divesting companies such as afforestation. There is a need for policy consistency to attract investments from key actors in the energy sector. And lastly, an overhaul of Nigeria's security architecture is necessary to guarantee and secure robust investments in the gas and other critical sectors in Nigeria. So basically this communique is going to be expanded at the end of the event, and it's going to be sent to all participants after it has been endorsed by everybody that is present. Thank you.
Please, another round of applause. Don't go yet. Good. Yes, you've all heard her. At this stage, we must either accept or reject the draft. For those in support, say aye. Those against, say nay. Okay, the ayes have it. Well done. At this stage, I've been warned that what happened in Burkina Faso should not happen here, that my tenure should be as brief as possible. So I hereby hand over the mic to Mr. Osadolo so that I don't run away with the power. I have the emergency powers. Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Gbenga Anoiga. At some point, I did introduce him as a former member of the board of NAETI. Also, of course, he was a great journalist during his years at the Federal Radio Corporation of Nigeria, covered State House and covered the Petroleum Ministry for many years. Gbenga Anoiga, thank you very much. And I already saw Frank Tietie, coming to take photos, probably videos of you. He's a radical human rights lawyer. So if anything happened, he would be up in your support. So distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we're now coming to the close of the dialogue, and we will take the closing comments from two of the conveners for us to wrap up. Once again, I'd like to invite Nafi Chineri. Nafi Chineri is of is the West Africa Regional Manager of the Natural Resource Governance Institute. Ms. Nafi.
Thank you very much. My name is Nafi Chineri. Chineri. Not Chineri, it's Chineri. This is the Ghanaian Chineri. All right, so on behalf of myself and the organization I represent, and the Natural Resource Governance Institute, my colleagues here, and Budget Foundation, the great team over there, well done, and NAETI, I would like to say that I have been overwhelmed with the level of participation and information that has been generated within this space of time. And as I said at the beginning, this is a very important conversation, whether you like it or not. It's going to affect you and I. It's going to affect you and I. Unfortunately, Africa hasn't been able to get to the stage where we influence global narratives. And because we are not able to influence global narrative, we need to plan around how global narrative and global movement affect our lives. And so this conversation that we are having today, or we've had today, it's very critical. Number two, it is very critical because very soon Nigeria is going into election. You're going to have a new government, whether we like it or not. There's going to be a change in government. I'm not saying that the current government is going away. Even if it stays, the people who are going to lead will be different. So there will be some kind of change. It's just important that we have this conversation and influence the agenda of the political parties, because it's a very critical issue. It's an issue that is going to affect the revenues, and the revenues that are required to fuel our communities. And so it's important that this conversation is had. And I'm very impressed that within the short space that the budget team, our team over there, have been able to put in place a very sharp and succinct recommendation that we can work with. So going forward, what do we have? I think that the issues that were raised in the communique resonate with all of us. All of us, there are issues about accountability and transparency, the youth, women, EITI, NRG. It's resonates with everyone, and so we agreed. Going forward, we need to make this work. We need to get something out of. From our side at NRGI and NATI and budget, we would look at it, edit it, and make it in a form that can be presented to government. And then after that, it is now the responsibility of you and I to make sure that we understand it and lobby our local government authority and political parties to make those issues a political campaign agenda, so that when they come back to power, we can hold them accountable. That's the only way that we can all tap ourselves here and say that we have done a great job, and then we have come up with something that really can transform our lives. On that note, I say thank you very much to all of you. I go back to Accra, a very happy woman, and I look forward to my next visit to Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nafi Chineri, West African Regional Manager, NRGI. Let me also respectfully invite Dr. Oji Ogbunaya Oji to give his closing remarks. His Executive Secretary, NATI.
Well, for us football lovers, since Ghana stopped us from going to the World Cup, or anything they say, I take them seriously. Because it was unbelievable. I didn't eat for 1 week. I couldn't believe it. Well, the deed has been done. No apologies required. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Chairman, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it's been a very wonderful, productive, for us, very engaging, productive one-day dialogue. And I really want to thank those who were able to articulate everything we've said in just very brief communique, which we will be releasing to the public. The essence of this for us, both the partners, the NRGI, the African Climate Foundation, and budget, we all have different but almost aligned goals when we convene this national dialogue. I speak for NATI. Our own is to stimulate public debate. Let that discussion start. And it should start based on the national plan our government, the federal government has developed. And we will be publishing a roadmap, which is almost at the draft stage. And the extent of that roadmap is also arising from the inputs that came out of this conference. NATI and our partners don't engage in workshops for just talking sake. We do things and we put the milestone that will lead to impact. The national roadmap, which we are developing, the inputs that have been made, we feed into that roadmap as we conclude the draft. And we will be reconvening the second national dialogue to present that roadmap.
hopefully before the end of the year. And that's one. The other one is to say that the communique will take very seriously. The action points in the communique will be shared with our partners and we'll define the next steps from there. And finally, I would like to ask that the partnership between NRGI, the African Climate Foundation, and Budget is clearly a partnership that has worked. And we would like to take that partnership to another level. On behalf of our board that are here, there will still be my colleague that will be making the vote of thanks. It's just to say that it has been a very, very rewarding and productive session. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ojo Bunaya Oji, for your closing remarks. At the end of the program, lunch will be served at the Obudu Grill. If you come out of this hall, take a right, walk up the steps, you'll find Obudu Grill. Just in case you get lost, ask questions. And the aroma from the grill will be sufficient to attract you. We are sorry that lunch is coming pretty late, but it's been time well spent. Let me now invite the Director of NATI, Dr. Donald Tuachimain, member of the National Institute, to thank all those who have made this dialogue a tremendous success that it has been today.
Thank you, sir. I'm happy that I have to offer these words of thanks at a time that almost everybody is hungry. So it will be very short. I want to appreciate everyone for finding time to be here. It shows the level of interest that we have on this debate. That we still have this number of people, even though the event took some time. We are working for our nation, and we believe that this is a consultative process that should involve the inputs of everyone. And so I want to appreciate you for your interest in being part of this event and for your interest for your country, Nigeria. I want to use this opportunity to also appreciate our partners, NRGI, Budget, and Climate Change Foundation. I remember the first day we started having this discussion with Tengi. We're not sure where it will get to. A lot of work has gone into the planning, and everybody has been involved in planning for the event up to this point. A lot of resources have been put into it. I want to appreciate you all for bringing us to this point. And I want to claim your indulgence that when we call on you in a month or 3 weeks or a month's time, please come, because at that point we'll be unveiling some of the plans that NATI as an organization has with respect to energy transition in Nigeria. And this is supposed to align with our responsibility as a transparency and accountability agency. Thank you very much and enjoy yourself.
Thank you very much, Dr. Donald MNI, for the vote of thanks. For us to close, please let's rise for the national anthem of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Arise, O compatriots, Nigeria's call obey, to serve our fatherland with love and strength and faith. The labors of our heroes past shall never be in vain. To serve with heart and mind, one nation bound in freedom, peace and unity. God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.